Thank you, everybody, for making it to the afternoon session and for your continued attendance throughout the day. This is a slightly kind of different couple of topics to the ones we've been dealing with today, but no less fascinating. And we're really kind of excited to hear both from Sonya, who's with us, and from Lada. I think what we'll do is we'll start, Lada, if that's okay, we'll start with Sonya's presentation. I'll introduce both of you now, and then Sonya will give her presentation, and then we'll go to your presentation, if that's okay, Lada, and then we'll open up to the floor for question and answer after both those presentations. Sonya Kvasha is a creative director and cultural producer. She works at the intersection of arts, media, design, and fashion. She's going to be speaking about her experiences in these different fields with us today. And the second speaker who's online is Lada Bilanyuk, who's a professor of anthropology at the University of Washington. Her fieldwork has included an investigation of the language dynamics in post-Soviet Ukraine, and more recently she's been publishing on creativity and resilience in the face of Russia's war. She's also published a piece or some pieces on focusing on the internet and memes during a time of war. So please welcome both speakers, and Sonya, floor is yours.
Hi all, thank you for coming and having me here. I'm Sonya. I was born in Dnipro, currently based in Kiev, and previously lived in Paris, and I also study right now in London, St. Martin's College, and I run a creative studio called Baby Prod, which is why you're seeing Treat Your Project Like a Baby on the screen. And the studio deals with realms of image, experience, and culture, which are treated as separate language systems, but also a language system together, which is why language is indirectly connected to everything that we do. However, it's one of the biggest issues for me personally is to try explaining what we do specifically. Lately came up some ideas like socially impactful storytelling, or I don't know, trying to find the new languages for culture. But it all started when I was at Vogue Ukraine, doing creative direction for the magazine. I came there when I was 18 as an editorial assistant, and then after a couple of years became a creative director. And now what you're seeing is some shit. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. You can see one of the covers that I find the most interesting during my couple of years, tenure as creative director, which is shot by the director Yorgos Lantimos, a Greek director of films such as Sacred Deer, The Killing of the Sacred Deer, and Begonia, with an Hollywood actress, Margaret Qualley. They're shooting in London. She has a prosthetic tongue. And they're in a film prosthetic studio in London. She's wearing Chanel, and the cover line, as you can see, is in English. At the time, the language of the magazine was Russian, and we made somehow a conscious decision to switch into English, because the magazine at the time was directed fully at the international and global audience. And our key idea was to produce a product that would be interesting on the international level for its content, and then it would be recognized as also Ukrainian product, and people would get interested in this as a product. However, we were all completely aware of the problematics of the magazine being in Russian. We constantly discussed it in the office, in the editorial office. We tried with different translations and ways, and English became the best solution because at the time it was considered commercially unviable to produce a magazine in Ukrainian, which now sounds ridiculous, but at the time it was like that. And when we are looking at this cover was considered frustrating by the team of the magazine because it was also very commercially unpopular and strange. And we had an advertiser, which was Chanel, and the editorial board was kind of considerate about how it's going to be perceived, and it kind of raises a lot of inner questions about what can be on the cover of Vogue magazine, what can be represented, what can this glossy magazine talk about, and how it can evolve in the world, and what can it mean in culture. And I think my point in Vogue was always getting what was normally beyond Vogue scope in Vogue. And that's how we produced work with Nan Golding, for example, one of the art issues, an art issue with Poln Pagisipuya, a couple of works with photographers that wouldn't normally ever work for Vogue. And that's how we got our niche in the international arena of Condé Nast magazines for being controversial. And that's why interesting, because Vogue was somehow decaying already back then. We are talking about maybe 2017, I don't know. And that's why I kind of regressed after a short tenure at the Holocaust Foundation, dealing with Holocaust memory of Babin Yar as an executive producer. I regressed into just running my own studio called Baby Prod. And we started from solely fashion production and casting. So we would do fashion shoots in Ukraine, and our main goal would be to bring international teams and international photographers and international brands to shoot in Ukraine. And that's how, for example, this book happened. This book by Patrick Bienert that's been sold in Delpire & Co. in Paris, and it was published by Patrick Remy Editions and was called like Captures the Beauty of Ukraine and its People. It has been always interesting for us to capture this beauty, but not be too focused on the localization of it. So we were always interested in bringing in international context and international talent to feed us and to get us interested in what we're doing and to have this natural dialogue. And it was always like how Baby Prod started. It was that many international talents were coming to Kyiv and they would ask us, where should we go? What should we see? Which restaurant, which assistant, where is the sightseeing, where is the club? And we would talk about all of it. And then me and my friends who co-founded the production thought it could be our gig, because also everything that we wanted to do, Vogue couldn't content because it was too diverse for Vogue to handle. So yeah, we went on with this production, and here I wonder if I can make it a bit smaller. So it's yeah, now I see. Oh no, not like this. Okay. Yeah. You can see when I'm saying like Vogue couldn't really handle all this content and ideas that we wanted to do. What you can see here now is a very funny collage, because a couple of months ago, before New Year, I had an intern, and they were discussing a task of positioning Baby Prod so it's clear for people what we do, because the normal reaction is like, wow, Instagram looks so exciting. It seems you're cool, but we don't get what you're doing. And the goal, like I had a couple of interns at the moment, and with one of the interns from Kharkiv, he's very interesting and talented guy who is opening up a dance school in Spain. And I wanted to discuss with him what could be the ways. And we discussed, and he wrote a couple of texts, and we discussed it again. Nothing worked. And then on the 31st of December, he sends me this collage. And I showed it to my junior partner, and we were laughing, and we super enjoyed. And this collage basically features her in Kharkiv being photographed for Anton Belinsky and Boris Mikhailov collaboration. She's standing in front of the Держпром, and like on our Instagram, you would see a big explanation of what Держпром is, and this is kind of fashion and Boris Mikhailov's work. The print is Boris Mikhailov's work. And then it features a casting that we did for a theater director, Richard Maxwell, from New York City Players, who presented his new play at Ivano-Franko Theater in Kiev this summer within the framework of the Factura program curated by Marta Kuzma and assisted and curated by Dasha, who is here now. It also features an exhibition by Ukrainian painter Ivan Grabko that we did. It also features that we produced and kind of facilitated. It also features some commercial casting photographs for our clients in New York. It also features a quite legendary cigarette holder at the event that we did at the opening of an institution, Pavilion of Culture in Kiev, that I'm also a joint curator at. So it's a very diverse set of activities that we take on. It also features parts of our event for the opening at the Ukrainian Pavilion at Architecture Biennale in Venice this year. It also features Marta Kuzma, who I interviewed for Vogue, in the flower of the table that we commissioned for another event for Ai Weiwei's presentation in Kiev. And kind of this collage, as crazy as it looks and unclear, quite well represents our position in trying to ideate interesting and engaging ways of telling the stories and ideas that we find exciting. And these ideas often lie kind of beyond they speak of topics that are quite generally discussed, but the ideas of and the approaches and languages that we find to communicate these ideas often lie beyond the common approaches or let's say, I will not say propaganda, but I would say that we are looking at soft power quite precisely, and the power is very, very soft. So it's funny, erotic, sexy, beautiful, aesthetic, and we kind of trust in radical power of aesthetics coming from, I would come here from Let's Do Something Stupid, which was a screenshot from a screening of a Crimean queer artist, Mikita Shkleruk, we did in Berlin. And he was talking about the experience of coming out in an occupied Crimea. And it was a very interesting conversation with just people who came, and we sat in a small room and discussed the experiences of coming out in different places that are problematic. But radical aesthetics, I'm coming to this publication that we produced recently for the closing event of the Venice Architectural Biennale this year in collaboration with Formar, which is an architectural studio, the Unbroken Center, which is one of the biggest rehabilitation centers, post-traumatic rehabilitation centers in Ukraine, now operating from Lviv. And it features, so we created a panel in Venice, a panel discussion about how a city and the adaptation of a city to the influx of trauma and traumatized bodies is similar to the process of making a prosthetic limb and adaptation of the person who had an amputation to his life, and how many facets that may have. And so we collaborated with an artist, photographer, Olena Subac, who works with themes of trauma and vulnerability in her work. She went to the prosthetic workshop in Unbroken, And the task was strange, to photograph the prosthetics without people and look at them. And that should have been black and white. And we were thinking about what does it mean to make visibility that is without hierarchy, without pushing for empathy, but kind of creating a language that allows contemplation, which is not necessarily providing an outcome, which just is a way to get people looking at things and embracing the process of looking and presence during the act of looking, without pushing for making any further step before they want to make a step. So that's why to accompany the talk, which featured Mark Vasuta, the professor of architecture at Columbia University, and the chief prosthetics engineer of Unbroken, Nazar Baknyuk, and the chief architect of Lviv, Anton Kalamitsev, discussing the adaptation of a city. We created this publication with a photographic story accompanying the interview to support this talk and to kind of to have a facsimile of how it went, and to be able to share this information in the most aesthetic way so that it could travel further. And I think this shows a good sum up of the approach that Baby Prod is trying to take, which is connecting the experience, the image, the language, and whatever is behind, inside, and rhythmically within it, in some kind of wholesome contexts that could be in any form and any media, but conveying the message, which is always asking for reflection and not participation, but mostly reflection and interaction with the material that is seen. Yeah, here are just some examples of what the similar approach was taken at the Berlin event I was talking about Mikita's little pop-up viewing room and a screening. And for that, we also produced a reader, which is called A Reader on Love, where we collected some, with the help of Yuliana Matasova, who spoke this morning, we collected poetry that speaks on queer love, but also on love generally, and where the Song of Songs by King David would see Agantangel Krimsky's early work and queer poetry. It's mixed. It would have English screenshots, Ukrainian screenshots, and it's kind of a very associative method of working, and it kind of indicates where we are going with trying to be intuitive in these expressions that we create. And then, yeah, talking about what we are doing now. Now I will, the projects that are in active progress, and just talk about what we are doing like in the works right now. We are doing this zine about female experience during the war, and this female experience both in historical context and now in Ukraine. We did a trip, like a collective active research trip to the female battalion of Khartia Brigade in the Kharkiv region this summer, and we spent 2 weeks with them. The photographer went with them to the positions, but we spent some time with these women, talking with them daily, showering with them, living in the same rooms, and trying to make imagery that would make us interested in looking at this imagery in a couple of years, and maybe in 10 years, in 20 years, and to share with kids. I don't know how to create some other ways of representation that we can have around female presence in combat. And this it features photography, it features the reflections of the photographer speaking with her psychoanalyst coming back from this trip, and it features conversations with women participate in the active combat positions, but also the medics and whoever was in the facility, and their conversations in between themselves, and their conversations, interviews with the photographer, and talks with us, and some quotes. So it's kind of also a collection of random thoughts, and it's called The Birth of Venus. Why it's called so is because the reference to the work of Botticelli, where the hair started to indicate movement in classical art, as opposed to a static figure, and that's what we thought of while making this work. We couldn't really understand why it was different from the images of women that we saw previously, taken portraits and documentary photography, and we were kind of making something between artistic research and documentary trip, and then it ended up looking a bit like a Vogue image, but not. So we found some kind of language in between that we found engaging, and that's kind of the movement and the reality of this position, which is neither heroic or not explicitly good or bad or whatever. It's very real, it's very active, and it's very fluid, as our life right now. It's like everything is very fluid, so what we do is also very fluid. So that's where the name comes from, and from there I would come to a recent shoot that we did for the magazine called Temptress, which is a Ukrainian born erotic magazine based in Berlin, from our friend and artist Julie Bali, who explores the feminist take on the erotics in her magazine. It's been running for a couple of years, and for that we shot a singer, Kazhanna, who has been super popular last couple of weeks or maybe months in Ukraine. She creates also a language that is surjik between Ukrainian and English, which is very interesting because it's a new kind of surjik that we kind of inherited after some time, and that is becoming the new way of mixing and creating this horizontal language relationship between high, low, popular culture and high fashion, and high culture and the museum, and the presence at Oxford, and why Kazhanna can be on the screen at Oxford. So I think she represents quite well, and her presence in this magazine and in this photo shoot where we played with the myth of Cinderella and how she's been in a Cinderella, and she's kind of condemned in a little cheap basic Kiev kid flat where she imagines herself a star, and she looks into different screens and creates projections of how she should be seen. And she recently had a big scandal with her promoting agency, as per her rights and her human subjectivity and her opinion. So I think it kind of, as funny as it may sound, it really encapsulates what we are seeking for, is kind of in every project or in every half project or act that we make, is kind of look for subjectivity and subjectivity of a human and the presence of a human inside of it. And we looking at small acts and small communities, and speaking of stories that have global impact, same as, for example, sports, but looking into really local, really personal and really authentic stories. And that's where the final image of this presentation comes from, a movie, a documentary, short documentary movie that we are now post-producing, about a small boxing gym in Kharkiv, near the frontline city, where a couple of like 10, 15 kids consistently train and kind of deal with their post-COVID during the war isolation, and deal with connection and learning to be together and connected to the others through their bodies, through conversations with their peers, through constant support of their trainer, but just through being present in this little space that continues and provides a space to be for them. So that's kind of it. Yeah. There is a quote I found recently, I don't remember where, about find a new relevance for an old idea of the soul. I think that's what we are doing every day. Thank you.